Hello everyone, we're making a large bedroom unit. It fits from wall to wall, it sits on the floor and it goes up to the ceiling. In the last video we selected the type of hinges that we wanted to use. We worked out the correct position of the hinges on the doors, we fitted the hinges and also their soft close mechanisms. In this video we'll be marking out and fitting the hinges onto the cupboard frames and hanging all the doors. I'll show you in some detail how to adjust the hinges to get the cupboard doors straight, level and lined up with each other. There's lots to do, so we best get on with it. Well, here we are inside the cupboard. We've got to put the marks on the upright here for holding the next cupboard. So the first mark is 100mm up from the bottom, which is just here, and we want to go 38mm in. 10, 20, 30, 5, 6, 7, 8 is there. So we now want to come up 225mm. 225 goes here, and we can check that it's 100 down from the top, which it is, and we need to go 38mm in, which goes there. So they're the centres of our two hinges. The two centres for the screws have got to go 16mm up and 60mm down from that point, which is 38mm in from this face. So it's given us our first point, so that's the centre, and then the two holes are for the hinge plate, and we do the same here. So we've marked out the centres of the holes. I now have the plates here for the hinges. Now remember, there's a little arrow on here which shows which way the hinge goes. So you put the plate on with the arrow pointing towards. Now if we put the plate over our centres, we can see that the little crosses we've made actually come in line with the two lines here that show the centre of those two slots. So that is good. I'm going to just use the bradawl to start the hole. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm using the same size screws as what holds the door on, which is 3.5s by 16s. I'll put the top one on first, remembering that the arrow points outwards. In fact, what I should do is put the screw through the hole, get that in the screwdriver, and then do that. That's the easiest way. Screw the screws in, and then just lift it so the screw is in line with the line that shows the centre of the slot, and the top one make fairly tight. Then we do the same with the bottom and the second one. Now with this second hinge, bring it up so it lines up. Now it all should line up if your measurements have been good, but just leave it a little bit loose. There we go, like that. And now we see if the door fits. Oh. Right, the door is here. Now to get these hinges on, you need to fold the hinge back, as I'm doing here, and you push it around so it clips at the front, and then you put pressure there and that clips in, and then the same with this one here, and that clips in. And now at that point you can, this one is now lined up. You can see I can force it now and move it. So move it where it wants to go. And now the door should close quite nicely. Which it does. Ta-da! And it bends right back on itself. And that is how you put the hinges on. Things have been moving on. We now have 6 doors fitted. 2, 4, 6. Now they've all been fitted, and the only thing that I've adjusted is the in and out, because if the hinge is too far in, when you try and close the door, the hinge binds. So you just have to push the hinge forward a little on that screw, which is right at the very back of the the hinge, that comes forward, and then the door is allowed to close. So the thing I've got to do now is line everything up. You can see that there's a large gap here between these two, and so that's the first cupboard, the third cupboard in that way. The centre cupboard is here. This needs to be lined up. That one is lower than this one. The gap is okay here. The gap should be about 3mm in the middle, and then 16mm here. All those cupboard fronts are up. The next one to do is this here. First of the non-square doors. And I've got to stick it on, just the same as the other doors. Let's look at the adjustments available in the hinge. These are there to help you align the doors once they're in place on the unit. There are 3 basic adjustments. The first will move the door either up or down. The second, in or out. And the third, left or right. Now in more depth. Up or down movement is achieved using the door securing screws. They're in the slots just here. You need to loosen the 2 screws in all the hinges of the door, and once loose you'll be able to move the door up or down. In or out movement can be made by adjusting this screw. This is normally only adjusted when you first hang the door. If the hinge is too close to the frame, it will bind and prevent the door closing all the way. If the hinge is too far away from the frame, the gap between the door and the frame is too large. Left or right movement can be made by adjusting this screw. If you move the adjustment in both hinges by the same amount, the door will move either left or right. But what happens if you adjust only one of the hinges either left or right? Now life gets interesting. If you only adjust the one hinge, the fun really starts. Now what I'm about to say sounds complicated, but once you've played with the adjustment screws for a while, you get the hang of it. Let's say you only move the top hinge and you move it to its left. The door will twist a little anti-clockwise about the lower hinge. These corners will fall, and the top one will move left a little, and the lower one won't. The reverse will happen if you move the top hinge to its right. Now let's move only the lower hinge. Again, we'll say we'll move it to the left. Now the door will rotate clockwise about the top hinge. These corners will rise, but the bottom one will move left a little, and the upper one won't. The reverse will happen if you move the bottom hinge to its right. This is how you can level the top surface of the door, and it's also how you get the gap between the 2 doors parallel. More on this later. So, how do you get all the doors level and to line up with each other? I'm sure the expert door hangers out there know a tried and tested method. I apologise now if what I came up with offends any of you in any way. I started with cupboard number 3. Using a spirit level and the left-right adjuster screws, I get the top surface of each door level. Don't worry if the doors are at different heights at this point, but the gap between the 2 doors down the front should be parallel, but not necessarily at the correct width. We now need to get the gap between the doors to the correct dimension. That's 3mm in our case, and keep those 2 lines parallel. We must also check and adjust, if required, the door overlap on the vertical sides of the doors to the frame. That's just by the hinges. In our case, that's 14mm. Both of these adjustments are made using the left-right adjuster screws in the hinges, but you must adjust both hinges in any one door exactly the same amount. If you don't get this correct, the door will twist slightly, your dimensions will go to bonk, and you'll start to pull your hair out. Look at the head of the adjuster screw in the first hinge. Twist it, but just a fraction, less than 1/4 of a turn. Now go to the second hinge. Look at the head of the adjuster screw and twist it the same way by the same amount as the first. Now check the dimensions. See what's moved? Is the movement in the correct direction? Have there been enough movement or too much? From these results you can decide if more adjustment is required and which way to twist the adjuster screws. The last thing to adjust is the height of the door on the frame. Take into account the door overlap measurement at the top and the bottom of the door. In our case, that's 14mm. Now, by loosening all of the hinge screws, you can adjust the door height till they are level with each other and have the correct door to frame overlap. The doors of cupboard 3 are now square and level. I set up cupboards 2 and 4 next, using the same procedure as before, but making sure the door heights are the same as cupboard 3. All 6 cupboard doors are now at the same level, and they overlap the frame by 14mm. Any 2 doors in any one cupboard are 3mm apart in the centre, and the gap between pairs of doors next to each other is 16mm. It's now time to fit the door with a sloping top. Here we are inside cupboard number 1. I mark out the hinge positions on the frame the same as I did in the other cupboards. I use a bradawl to mark the screw centres and screw the hinge plates in place. And now assemble the door. Job done. Here you see me adjusting the hinges of the door with a sloping top. It needs to be level with the cupboard doors to its right. All the doors are now at the same level. I tried to clamp the triangular door to the frame, but I can't get a straight pull. I need to think of a different idea. I've decided how to attach the small triangular door into cupboard number 1. I'm going to fit 2 12mm dowels in the cupboard frame. On the rear of the door in the bottom corner I will fit a catch plate. This will slide behind the 2 dowels, holding the door closed in that corner. The doors will be locked into position using 2 brass slide bolts. These bolts will be mounted on their own wooden blocks, and the blocks will be attached to the top and bottom of the door. 2 video clips now. The first is a close-up of the 12mm dowels. The second is concerning the bolts and their mounting blocks. These are the 2 12mm dowels in the frame. They are 20mm proud of the surface of the frame, and they're 20mm deep. Now this bolt I want to fit onto a chunk of wood like this. It's going to go this way round, and it will be attached to the back of the door. So the door will be here, and this will come out and then go into the frame. It's going to go into the frame, so I don't need the brass socket. So that can go. But what I will need to do, what I will need to do is drill a hole in the right location for the bolt to fit into. Now, once I get it all together, it's really difficult to mark and work out where this is. Now, here's a little trick. These bolts come apart. Now, you've got to be a little bit careful. You'll notice that the handle on the bolt is a hex, and if you put a spanner onto the hex and turn it, well, what do you know? It loosens and now comes out. Now, don't go and push this bolt out straight away. The reason being, there's a certain amount of resistance there. You can see I've got to pull it backwards and forwards. And that's because inside here there's a ball bearing with a spring which fits in a hole in the bolt. And if I push this out hard, then that spring and ball will go away. So you have to push it up here slowly. Here we go. Now, can you see just in there, there's the head of the ball. If I keep, I'm going to have to put my thumb over it to stop it popping out. But I put my thumb there. Right, it's now come out. If I take my thumb away, and there you see the ball. There it is. And inside, there's a little spring as well. And now the bolt comes out. And now the bolt is out. If I screw this to my piece of wood, and then screw the piece of wood to the door, if I bolt it all together, or clamp it together, hold it in the right place, then what I can do is, once it's all there and nicely lined up, I can get a drill, a 7mm drill in this case, go down through the lock here, and even if I can't fit an electric drill here, I can spin this, which will give me the centre of where the bolt will end up. When you come to put it back in, you can simply put the spring in here. This needs to go back with the hole up this end first. Push it through. Put the little ball bearing on top. Push this back, and now push the ball bearing down with your thumbnail. Clips in. Can screw the handle in, and that means we have a bolt which is tight because of the ball bearing in there, but it doesn't rattle around. The triangular door needs to be held in its final position against the cupboard frame. Once there, I can drill the frame with the 2 holes required to take the shafts of the 2 brass bolts. I've already tried to clamp the door in position, but I couldn't get a good angle with the clamps. You see here now my solution. I clamp the length of MDF board to the frame, its top surface being the same level as the bottoms of the doors to the right. I move the triangular door till it's in the correct horizontal position, and then mark that position on the frame. And as you can see, the door now has its clip at this end and the 2 bolts on their respective mounting blocks at this end. This end of the frame I've fitted 2 12mm dowels, and that will be captured, or those dowels will be captured by the gap here. So we've pushed the door in place. We are clipped onto the 2 dowels at that end. I have marks on the frame here to show that I'm in the right position, which I am. So the next thing I do is with my 7mm drill, I can drill the positions of the bolts. Now that will be a nice easy one to drill because I can go straight up there with the drill. The one down here, because I'm so close to the door, I won't be able to use the drill on that. What I have to do there is perhaps tap it with a little piece of wood just to mark it nicely on the frame, and then I'll drill the frame by hand. I drill the easy hole first. Tap the drill bit whilst it sits in the lower bolt body. It leaves a centre mark on the frame. I remove the door and drill the hole. Vacuum the shavings away, remove the sharp edges with the countersink, and we're ready to fit the door. Right, we have the door. So our 2 pegs go behind the clip on here. So we place the door on the frame, push it in, the clips are held at the back, and now these 2 locking bolts, if we pull it out, should go straight into the hole, which is done. Fold the actuation knob back, and we'll do the same to the top bolt, push it all the way up, push the actuation lever to 90 degrees, and there it is. It is in place. It is solid. It ain't going anywhere. Let's see how it looks with the other door. Spot on. Right, another jobbed. What's next? Well, what's next is the hanging of the wardrobe doors. You see me here marking out where the hinges need to go. I use a bradawl to make the centres. Screw the hinge plates in position. I make sure the small arrows stamped on the surface are pointing out of the wardrobe. Clip in the first of the wardrobe doors. Now on with the second. I mark out where the hinges go, fit the hinge plates, hang the door, do some door levelling, and then on to the next wardrobe. Our bedroom unit is coming on. It's looking really quite smart at the moment. We've now finished fitting the hinges. We've adjusted the doors so everything is nice and straight. They're all parallel with each other and they're all level. In the next video we're going to be looking at the manufacture of the drawer fronts. We've got 9 drawer fronts to make. Once they are fitted, we're then going to chamfer all the edges of all the doors and the drawer fronts, and that'll give a nice softer look to the whole unit. Could you do something like this? Of course you can. And with that, this video is at an end. Take care everybody. I'll see you next time. Could you do something like this? Of course you can.